I ruined my wonderful life in 24 hours. I've always been ambitious. My passion for finance began back in university when I realized that the ability to make money isn't just a talent, but a science that can be mastered. My name is Alex, and I spent most of my life in New York. After graduating from university, I quickly climbed the career ladder, becoming one of the leading financial analysts at a company specializing in startup investments. It seemed like success was just a matter of time. Everything changed in early March 2024. I had been working at the company for over 6 years, and every move I made was well thought out. But on this day, upon receiving news about a potential merger of our company with a large investment holding, I felt something different. It was like an inner sixth sense whispering that now was the time to take a risk. I was told that if this merger went through, the profit could be 10 times greater than all our previous deals combined. My heart raced as I heard the figures. An investment of $100,000 promised to yield over $1 million within a few months. This was what I had dreamed of. A chance to change my life, calculate all the options, and come out on top. But, of course, there was one but. This chance could cost me everything I had. I knew such a risk could be fatal, but I also felt that I had to take this step because opportunities like this come once in a lifetime. My wife, Sarah, had always supported me, but this time her intuition was whispering something entirely different. She saw how passionate I was about the idea, but her eyes were filled with fear. She often repeated that the risks were too great and that we shouldn't bet everything on it. However, my ambition outweighed common sense. Feeling responsible for our family's future, I decided to take the plunge, not suspecting that this decision would become the worst of my life. It was hard to imagine that one day everything could go wrong. That morning, when I learned about the potential merger, I already had a clear plan of action. I contacted the bank to take out a loan and also began gathering all my savings. Within a few hours, I had raised $150,000, all I had. It seemed like nothing could go wrong. I was confident that I had made the right decision. Expecting huge profits, I began dreaming about how our lives would change. I planned to buy a new house, perhaps even move to the suburbs where we could raise our future children. Sarah supported my dreams, although she was concerned about my enthusiasm. She kept repeating that money isn't everything and we needed stability, not risky investments. However, I was relentless. On the day I decided to invest everything, I couldn't even imagine that something bad could happen. On the contrary, I was completely convinced of my righteousness. I was sure I had done everything right, calculated all possible scenarios, considered all factors, even consulted with my colleagues. But deep down, there was a strange feeling of anxiety. It was barely noticeable, like a vague sense of discomfort when you know you've forgotten something but can't recall what it is. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the positives, the potential gains, and the great prospects. But the anxiety didn't go away. It grew like a weed, filling every corner of my mind. In the evening of the same day, when Sarah and I were having dinner, I tried again to discuss our future. I told her that everything would be fine, that we were on the brink of great success. But her eyes remained sad. She barely listened to me, just nodded in response, but I could see that her thoughts were far away. She said only one thing: "I just want you to be happy, and for us to be together, whatever happens." It touched me deeply. I began to question whether money could really make me happy. Was it worth risking everything for this chance? But every time I approached this question, my pride pushed me forward. I couldn't just back down. I decided I had to prove to everyone, and especially to myself, that I could succeed. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. I felt confident, almost invulnerable. All my previous experience suggested that I had made the right decision. But as I sat down at my desk and began analyzing the news that started coming in, my confidence began to fade. Rumors about a potential market downturn grew with each passing minute. My inner voice, which I had tried to suppress, was screaming about danger. I tried to calm myself, convincing myself that these were just temporary fluctuations and that everything would stabilize soon. But deep down, I knew the situation was getting out of control. I tried to reach out to some colleagues, but they only confirmed my worst fears. The market was starting to fall. With each passing minute, my anxiety turned into full-blown panic. At that moment, I realized that I could lose everything. Every minute of delay could cost me all my savings. I tried to find a way out, but all my options began to seem out of reach. Decisions that had seemed right just yesterday now appeared catastrophic. It was at this moment that I realized my ambition had led me to the edge of a precipice. The situation worsened by the hour. News of the merger being canceled spread instantly, and everyone began to panic. Stock prices plummeted rapidly, along with my chances of salvaging my investments. I knew that even if I managed to recover part of the money, it would be a pitiful amount compared to what I had lost. All my dreams of a new house, of a stable and happy life, began to crumble like a sandcastle. I sat at my desk, feeling hopeless. How did this happen? How could I have been so wrong? I couldn't find answers to these questions. My life, which had seemed full of prospects just yesterday, had now turned into a nightmare. I tried to find a way out, but every option seemed doomed to failure. I replayed all my decisions over and over in my mind, searching for where I had made a mistake. But the answer was clear. I had overestimated my capabilities. My desire to achieve everything all at once had become my biggest mistake. At that moment, I realized that I had lost not just money. I had lost faith in myself, in my decisions. I could no longer look at myself in the mirror because each time I saw a person who had destroyed their life with their own hands. It was hard to accept. Even harder was accepting that this wasn't a dream, but a reality that I had created myself. I began to think about my family. What would I tell Sarah? How would she react to the news that we had lost everything? I couldn't imagine her reaction. She had always been my support, but how could she support me after this? These thoughts were eating me up from the inside. I was in despair. I couldn't find any hope for a better future. In those moments when I tried to gather my thoughts, Mr. Williams, my boss, approached me. He was serious and almost emotionless. He asked me about the current situation, and I couldn't hide the truth. I told him about my actions, the risks I had taken, and that I was now on the brink of disaster. He listened carefully, then simply nodded silently, leaving me alone in the office. After he left, I felt as though my world had crumbled even further. I realized that it was only a matter of time before the consequences of my decision became known to everyone. I sat in the empty office, feeling completely shattered. I knew that now I would have to find the strength to tell everyone. But how could I do that? How could I admit that I had ruined not only my own life, but also theirs? My internal struggle was escalating. I felt cornered, with no way out. Every thought, every option seemed hopeless. I could no longer find the strength to fight. All I could do was wait for the inevitable end. It was the worst feeling I had ever experienced. Despite this, I knew I couldn't remain in this state. I needed to act, even if I didn't know what exactly to do. My wife and friends had great hopes in me, and I couldn't just give up. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there was no way out. I decided to reach out to Kevin, my best friend. He had always been a source of inspiration and support for me. We had spent many hours together discussing possibilities and risks. He was the only person who could understand me and perhaps find a solution. But even he couldn't help. When I told him everything that had happened, he tried to calm me down, but his words made no sense. He talked about it being just temporary difficulties, that the market always recovers. But I no longer believed that. My world had come to an end, and I could no longer deceive myself. I knew that I had lost everything. With each passing day, my thoughts grew darker. I began to doubt myself, my decisions, my future. I no longer saw any light at the end of the tunnel. All my dreams and ambitions had vanished, leaving me alone with my fears and failures. At that moment, I realized that I needed to accept reality as it was. I could no longer live in fantasies of great success. My dream had turned into a nightmare, and now I needed to find a way to cope with it. But that was easier said than done. Sarah noticed how I had changed. She no longer saw the confident man she had known before. We barely spoke as I avoided her gaze. I couldn't look her in the eyes because I knew I had betrayed her trust. My heart was breaking with pain and shame. I still can't believe this happened to me. It's such a cliche to say I wasn't warned, but in reality, I was warned. Sarah warned me. Even Kevin warned me, though I thought he was on my side. But I didn't listen. I was absolutely convinced of my plan. Back in early March, when I began acting, everything seemed perfect. I invested all my savings into this plan, $120,000. Most of it went into buying shares of a company that, in my opinion, was supposed to be the key to our future wealth. I knew that one day it might pay off, but I needed more money for that. So I borrowed another $50,000 from Kevin, my best friend from university. He had always trusted my business instincts, and I couldn't explain to him how hard it was for me to ask him for this. But Kevin didn't hesitate. He said, "Alex, I believe in you. You know what you're doing." And I truly thought I did. Sarah saw me getting more and more immersed in this project, and with each passing day, she became more and more anxious. She told me that I was risking too much, that the risks were too great. She said we needed to be more careful since we didn't have a large safety net. But I brushed off her concerns. I thought she just didn't understand how important this was. This was our chance to break out of the middle class, our chance to improve our lives. When on March 17th, 2024, I learned that the merger which was supposed to bring us significant profit had been suddenly canceled, I just couldn't believe it. I sat in my office on the 28th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, staring at my computer screen in shock. The news came like a bolt from the blue. The market began to plummet sharply. Stocks crashed nearly 50% within a few hours, and I realized we were losing everything. I couldn't afford to lose hope. It wasn't in my nature. I quickly calculated that I had about $30,000 left and decided to invest it immediately. But there was no time for analysis or reflection. I just poured that money into any risky projects promising quick returns. It was my only chance to fix the situation. But instead of fixing things, I only made the situation worse. Every time I thought the market had hit rock bottom, it fell even further. My investments were wiped out in a matter of days. It was a terrifying time when I couldn't find any solution. All my plans crumbled to dust. I didn't know what to do next. This failure made me remember past times when I was more cautious in my decisions. I recalled how my father always emphasized the importance of stability. He was an old-fashioned man who believed in reliability and predictability. Money should be earned slowly and carefully, he used to say, and I always listened to his advice. But then, in March 2024, I ignored his words, tempted by the promise of quick profits. These memories only added to my pain. I realized that my greed and desire for rapid success had led me to this disaster. Now, I had not only lost all my savings, but also let down those who trusted me the most. I could no longer look at myself in the mirror. My pride was shattered, and I didn't know if I would ever recover from this. Sarah, who had always been my support, began to distance herself from me. She no longer recognized the man she once loved. We argued more frequently. She accused me of destroying our future. Her words struck me to the core. She was right, but I couldn't admit it. I began to feel anger toward her because I saw in her a reminder of my failures. One day, after another disastrous day at work, we fought again. Sarah was very upset and began to cry. I couldn't take it anymore. I was so angry with myself and with her that I lost control and raised my hand against her. That was the moment I lost everything. Not just my money, but my dignity as well. Sarah ran to the bedroom, closing the door behind her. I stood in the living room, feeling the weight of everything that had happened over the past weeks pressing down on me. It was a moment of absolute downfall. I realized that I had not only lost everything material, but also spiritual. My family, my support, all of it had crumbled under the weight of my own mistakes. The next morning, Sarah packed her things and left. She said she needed some time to think everything over. I didn't try to stop her. I knew it was the end of our life as we knew it. She didn't come back that evening and didn't return the next day. I was left alone with my failure. These were the darkest days of my life. I remained in an empty apartment, burdened with debt and without any hope for the future. All my attempts to fix the situation only worsened it. I was on the brink of despair and didn't know where to turn. My world had collapsed, and I was the only one to blame. My life was out of control. I became the subject of mockery at work, and even my boss, Mr. Williams, no longer believed in me. He fired me 2 weeks after the merger was canceled. His words were cold and ruthless. "Alex, I always believed in you, but now I see that you can't handle the responsibility." Those words cut to my heart, but I knew he was right. I no longer had a job or a family. The only thing left were memories of how things could have turned out differently. If only I had listened to Sarah. If only I had been more cautious in my decisions. But now it was too late. I was left with nothing. The final blow was that Kevin, my best friend, also turned away from me. He found out that I had lost his money and no longer wanted anything to do with me. He said he no longer trusted me and that I had let him down too much. It was the final nail in the coffin of my former pride. This story left a deep mark on my soul. It changed me, and not for the better. I am no longer the Alex who dreamed of great success and wealth. I became a person who lost everything and is now searching for even a glimmer of hope for the future. But will I find it? That question remains unanswered. Reddit user. Comments: realistic optimist. "Alex, this is just awful. I don't even know what to say." It might sound cliche, but you're not alone in your struggles. Many people make mistakes, but it's important to find a way to overcome them. Finance Guru 1985. This is a lesson everyone should remember. Never invest more than you're willing to lose, but I believe you can get back on your feet. The main thing is not to give up. Broken Dreams 123. I went through something similar a few years ago, and it almost broke me. You need to find a way to forgive yourself, even if it seems impossible right now. Lonely Investor. This is a story that everyone who wants to get rich quickly needs to hear. I hope you find the strength to move on. You made a mistake, but it's not the end. Sarah was right. It seems like Sarah sensed something was wrong from the beginning. It's a shame you couldn't discuss it earlier. I wish you peace and a chance to start over. I tried to calm myself, convincing myself that these were just temporary fluctuations and that everything would stabilize soon. But deep down, I knew the situation was getting out of control. I tried to reach out to some colleagues, but they only confirmed my worst fears. The market was starting to fall. With each passing minute, my anxiety turned into full-blown panic. At that moment, I realized that I could lose everything. Every minute of delay could cost me all my savings. I tried to find a way out, but all my options began to seem out of reach. Decisions that had seemed right just yesterday now appeared catastrophic. It was at this moment that I realized my ambition had led me to the edge of a precipice. The situation worsened by the hour. News of the merger being canceled spread instantly, and everyone began to panic. Stock prices plummeted rapidly, along with my chances of salvaging my investments. I knew that even if I managed to recover part of the money, it would be a pitiful amount compared to what I had lost. All my dreams of a new house, of a stable and happy life, began to crumble like a sandcastle. I sat at my desk, feeling hopeless. How did this happen? How could I have been so wrong? I couldn't find answers to these questions. My life, which had seemed full of prospects just yesterday, had now turned into a nightmare. I tried to find a way out, but every option seemed doomed to failure. I replayed all my decisions over and over in my mind, searching for where I had made a mistake. But the answer was clear. I had overestimated my capabilities. My desire to achieve everything all at once had become my biggest mistake. At that moment, I realized that I had lost not just money. I had lost faith in myself, in my decisions. I could no longer look at myself in the mirror because each time I saw a person who had destroyed their life with their own hands. It was hard to accept. Even harder was accepting that this wasn't a dream, but a reality that I had created myself. I began to think about my family. What would I tell Sarah? How would she react to the news that we had lost everything? I couldn't imagine her reaction. She had always been my support, but how could she support me after this? These thoughts were eating me up from the inside. I was in despair. I couldn't find any hope for a better future. Now, as I write these lines, it's hard to believe that all of this happened to me. It all began when I received that fateful call from Mr. Williams. It was March 24th, 2024, around 10 a.m. I had just arrived at the office, set up my computer, and was ready to start a new day. But instead of receiving another task to tackle and possibly trying to salvage at least part of my mistakes, I heard William's voice, which was as cold as ice. "Hello, Alex," he said, and even in his tone, I sensed that something was wrong. He was not the same Williams I knew before. No greeting, no support, just a dry, emotionless voice. "We need to talk," he continued. "I want you to come to my office right now." My heart began to race, and I realized that this was going to be more than just a regular conversation. I went up to the 20th floor where Williams's office was located, and with every step, my internal tension grew. Everything inside me screamed that this was a bad sign, but I tried to calm myself. Maybe I could explain the situation to him. Maybe we could find some solution. But as soon as I crossed the threshold of his office, I realized that I had no chance. Williams was sitting behind his large wooden desk, and there was no hint of sympathy on his face. He was stern and focused. My legs began to tremble, and I stopped by the door, unable to move closer. "Sit down, Alex," he said, not looking up from the documents on his desk. I slowly approached the chair and sat down, feeling every cell of my body tense up. "Alex," he began, sighing, "we both know that things haven't been going as we hoped recently." His words hit me like a hammer on an anvil. "Since the merger was canceled, the company has lost a significant portion of its assets, and frankly, you haven't managed the situation well." I opened my mouth to say something, but he raised his hand, stopping me. "Listen, Alex, I appreciate your attempts to fix the situation, but the reality is that your decisions have only worsened it. The company has lost millions due to your actions, and we can't ignore that." Each of his words cut into me like a knife. I felt the cold creeping inside me, and my body began to go numb. "I'm forced to let you go," he said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. I sat silently, unable to believe my ears. My career, which I had spent so many years building, ended in an instant. Everything I had built was destroyed. I remember slowly rising from the chair, barely feeling my legs. Mr. Williams signed some document and handed it to me. It was my termination notice. "You can collect your things and leave the office by the end of the day," he added coldly. I took the document without even looking at it and silently walked out of his office. As I walked down the corridor, it felt like everyone around was watching me. Maybe it was just in my imagination, but I felt those gazes like knives in my back. No one approached me. No one said a word. The silence was deafening. I returned to my office, where all my personal belongings were scattered across the desk. They no longer held any meaning. As I gathered my things, thoughts swirled in my mind about how quickly everything could fall apart. Just a month ago, I was on top of the world, and now everything was lost. My heart ached with pain, and I could barely hold back my tears. I felt empty, like a shell of the person I once was. The last thing I did was take down a photograph from the desk, our wedding photo with Sarah. We both looked so happy, so carefree. Now it seemed like a distant dream. I placed the photo in the box, and with one last look at the office that had been my second home, I left. It was the end, and I had no idea what to do next. When I got home, Sarah was already waiting for me. She knew something had happened, but didn't know all the details. I tried to gather my thoughts, but couldn't find the words. I just silently handed her the termination notice. She took it, read it, and then looked at me. Her eyes were filled with sadness and regret. "Alex, I can't take this anymore," she said in a quiet voice. "We've lost everything we had. and I don't know if I can continue living like this." I felt my heart stop. Her words were like the final blow. She explained that she needed some time to think things over and that she was going to stay with Lucy, her friend, for a few days. I was devastated. I no longer had the strength to fight. She packed her things, and I couldn't say anything to her. I just stood there, watching her leave our home. When the door closed behind her, I felt utterly alone. It was what I had feared the most, losing her. And now it had happened. I was left alone in the empty house. It seemed like every room was filled with memories of happier times that now felt so distant. I wandered from room to room, trying to find answers to questions that plagued me. How did this happen? How did I allow my life to fall apart so quickly? My soul was shattered. I realized that I had lost not only money and a job, but also, most importantly, my family and happiness. My life felt empty, and I didn't know how to fix it. The only thing I could do was admit to myself that my ambitions and greed had led me to this disaster. I spent several days in deep depression, not leaving the house. I just lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do next. My life had lost its meaning. I no longer had a goal, no plans. All my dreams and ambitions had vanished, leaving me in darkness. But despite all this hopelessness, I began to realize something important. I understood that money could not replace the true values in life. I had lost myself in the pursuit of wealth and had forgotten what truly mattered. My family, my love for Sarah, that was what I should have cherished above all else. This realization gave me a bit of strength. I began to understand that perhaps all was not lost. I knew I had to do everything possible to win Sarah back, to correct my mistakes. But I also knew it wouldn't be easy. I would have to work on myself, on my character, to become someone deserving of her love and trust once again. I decided to start small. I reached out to Lucy to find out how Sarah was doing. She told me that Sarah was very upset, but still loved me. This gave me hope. I decided to write Sarah a letter in which I confessed all my mistakes and promised that I would do everything I could to make things right. The letter was simple and sincere. I didn't try to make excuses. I just told her the truth, that I had been blinded by my ambitions, that I had neglected her feelings, and that now I understood that true happiness isn't in money, but in love and family. I asked her to come back home so that we could try to start over. I didn't know if I would get a response. I was prepared for the possibility that she might not want to come back, but I sent the letter anyway, and I waited. Each day was agony. But I knew that now I had to be patient. I had lost everything, but now I wanted to regain at least the most precious thing I had, her love. Reddit user comments. Empathy. Needed. This story is just heartbreaking. Sometimes we lose the most important things when we focus too much on the trivial. I hope Sarah gives you another chance. Honest mistakes. This is a lesson we should all remember. We all make mistakes, but it's important to realize what really matters in time. Hang in there, Alex. Life is hard. 1, 2, 3. Losing a job is terrible, but losing a family is even worse. I hope you can fix your mistakes and win Sarah back. Risk taker. Of course, we all want to succeed, but sometimes it's important to take a step back and think about what we're willing to risk. Wishing you strength, Alex. Supportive stranger. It seems like your story is a warning for many. It's important not to forget what truly matters and to cherish what we have. The story I've shared with you has been a harsh lesson for me. The risks we take in life can have unpredictable consequences. I made a choice that changed my entire life, and although it was a bitter experience, it taught me to value true values. We often become so focused on achieving success that we forget about what we already have: family, love, and the support of those close to us. Now, I want to invite you to share your own stories. Have you ever made risky decisions that impacted your life? Perhaps you have faced similar difficulties. Do you have lessons that you want to share with others? Your story might help someone avoid the same mistakes, or perhaps provide hope to those going through tough times. Don't hesitate to share your experiences in the comments. Let's discuss together which decisions are worth making and which are better to avoid. Maybe someone will find inspiration or support in your story. Let's build a community where we can openly talk about risks, losses, and victories, and learn from each other's experiences.